Okay, let's dive right in. We are going to talk about how a single poem became one of the most effective political weapons of its time. And it did it by using a, get this, 3,000-year-old story about family betrayal to try and decide the future of an entire kingdom.
It might sound a little out there, but all those political takedowns, the attack ads, even the memes we see flying around online today, they all have their roots in this one brilliant, absolutely savage poem from way back in 1681. Seriously, John Dryden basically wrote the playbook for political spin as we know it.
So to really get why a poet had to jump into the middle of a political firestorm, we've got to rewind the clock to late 17th century England. And believe me, this wasn't just some polite political debate. It was a full-blown crisis that was threatening to tear the entire country apart.
Okay, so it all boiled down to one huge problem: succession. See, King Charles II, well, he had a lot of kids, but not a single legitimate heir. That meant the crown was supposed to go to his brother, James. And what was the big deal? Well, James was a devout Catholic. For a fiercely Protestant England, that idea was, well, it was terrifying.
And you have to understand, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. The whole thing was lit on fire by something called the Popish Plot back in 1678. It was a completely made-up conspiracy theory, total fake news, but it sent this massive wave of anti-Catholic paranoia just sweeping across the nation. It was this fear that set the stage for a huge, bitter fight in Parliament to keep James off the throne, a fight that, tragically, would end in a bloody rebellion. So this crisis basically split the kingdom right down the middle into two teams. On one side, you had the Whigs. They were led by this incredibly clever guy, the Earl of Shaftesbury. Their mission was simple: do whatever it takes to block James from becoming king. Their guy, the king's illegitimate but very popular and very Protestant son, the Duke of Monmouth. And on the other side, you had the Tories. They were loyal to King Charles and believed that the line of succession was sacred, that it was a divine right. And their secret weapon, their champion with a pen, was John Dryden. So how does Dryden decide to fight this battle of ideas? He doesn't just write a boring essay or some political pamphlet. No, he does something much more clever. He reaches way, way back, like nearly 3,000 years back into the Old Testament. And what does he pull out? A shocking, violent, and unforgettable family tragedy to use as his weapon.
So the story he chose comes from the book of 2 Samuel. It all starts in King David's court, with his son, Amnon. And Amnon becomes sick, just consumed with this agonizing obsession for his beautiful half-sister Tamar.
Now, Amnon has this friend, Jonadab, and clever is putting it mildly. He comes up with this cruel, manipulative plan. Amnon should pretend to be sick and then beg for Tamar, and only Tamar, to come take care of him.
And the terrible thing is, the plan works. Once he gets her alone, Amnon attacks her. She pleads with him. She begs him, "No, my brother, don't do this terrible crime." She appeals to his honor, to the laws of their people, but he just won't listen. And then comes this truly twisted part. The moment the assault is over, that intense love he felt turns into an even more intense hatred. He can't even stand the sight of her. He calls her this woman and has a servant literally throw her out on the street and bolt the door.
This is when Tamar's full brother, Absalom, finds her, completely devastated. He tells her to be quiet about it for now, but inside he is just simmering with this cold, calculating rage against Amnon. And he waits. For 2 full years he plots his revenge. Finally, the moment comes. At a big sheep-shearing feast, when Amnon is drunk and happy on wine, Absalom gives the order to his men, "Kill Amnon." And they do. They strike him down right there. It's just a brutal, shocking end to a story of desire, betrayal, and ultimately, revenge.
Okay, so why? Why this incredibly brutal ancient story? Well, because for John Dryden, it was the perfect mirror for what was happening in England right then. He took this tragic family drama and mapped it, piece by piece, directly onto the political crisis, creating one of the most brilliant and devastating allegories ever written. And this right here, this is the decoder ring for the entire poem. The parallels were so clear no one could miss them. King David, the powerful but kind of indulgent king, that's King Charles II. The handsome, ambitious, rebellious son, Absalom, that's the Duke of Monmouth. And the really juicy part, the manipulative, treacherous advisor, Achitophel whispering poison in his ear, that was a direct hit on the Whig leader Shaftesbury.
Even the Jews in the story were meant to be the English people, fickle and easily tricked.
Now, this strategy was absolutely genius for two reasons. First, it took this messy, complicated political squabble and turned it into a timeless moral drama, a biblical story of loyalty versus betrayal. And second, it gave him plausible deniability. I mean, he wasn't technically accusing Shaftesbury of treason, he was just retelling a Bible story, right? Everyone knew exactly who he was talking about, but it was almost impossible to pin on him.
And Dryden's attacks were just devastating. Just listen to how he describes Achitophel, who is really Shaftesbury. He says he's fit for close designs and crooked counsels, sagacious, bold, and turbulent of wit. He's basically saying, yeah, the guy is a genius, a restless, scheming, unprincipled genius. It's a total masterclass in character assassination.
And he didn't stop with the leader. Oh no. He took these sharp, witty shots at other opponents too. Take the powerful Duke of Buckingham, for example. Dryden recasts him as Zimri, a guy who was everything by starts and nothing long. Basically calling him a total dilettante who dabbled in everything from science to politics to music, but was good at none of them. In a single month, he says, the guy was a chemist, fiddler, statesman, and buffoon. It's just vicious, but you have to admit, it's incredibly clever.
So, what's the big takeaway here? I mean, why are we still talking about a poem that's over 300 years old? Well, it all comes down to the raw power of narrative. See, what Dryden understood, maybe better than anyone at the time, is that politics isn't really a battle of facts and policies, it's a battle of stories. He took this really complex political crisis and boiled it down to a simple, powerful, and unforgettable tale. A good but flawed king, his handsome but foolish son, and a devil-like advisor leading them both to ruin. And let's be honest, in politics, the side with the better story, that's usually the side that wins.
Now, for his part, Dryden claimed he had a much higher purpose. He wasn't just slinging mud for fun. In the intro to his poem, he argued that the true end of satire is the amendment of vices by correction. In other words, he saw himself as a kind of political doctor, exposing the sickness in the kingdom so it could be cured. Whether you buy that or not, that was his defense.
And that really brings us to the big question, the one that's just as relevant today. In our world, which is just flooded with stories on the news, on social media, everywhere you look, Dryden's masterpiece forces us to stop and ask ourselves, when is a story just a story, and when is it a weapon?